With all the controversies that have plagued this movie,
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird, weird.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time when I was doing this film.
Snow White live adaptation is finally upon us, and I would say that it is as bad as expected. In this video, we will focus on what made the Snow White adaptation fail and compare it to the original movie to see why that worked where this one didn't. If that interests you, stick around as we dive into why Disney's live action Snow White fails. The movie decided to flesh out Snow White's origins by starting with how she lived happily with her parents, baking apple pies and sharing them with the villagers, singing and dancing and all that stuff. It's weird, but yay. Her mother later dies and her father marries a beautiful woman who just happens to wander into the kingdom one day, I guess. The father goes to war, after which he dies, leaving just Snow White and her stepmother. As a side note, as a result of the controversies, I believe that this movie was rewritten and reshot only God knows how many times, and it shows because the plot is all over the place. The movie awkwardly shifts from one theme to the other, starting with fair, brave and true, and then suddenly focusing on kindness. And above all, the movie is boring. Like, it's super boring, okay? Now, enough of me yapping and let's get right into it. To kickstart the plot, she meets the male lead, who is not a prince in this movie, unfortunately, but at least he's Robin Hood. Anyway, he goes to steal potatoes from the castle because everybody is hungry and there isn't enough food in the land, but there is an abundance in the castle, so why not? Snow White, for some reason, is just hearing about this and says she wants to speak to the queen about the hardship. It seems to me that she just grew courage from somewhere because she works as a slave in her own home and she is shocked that the queen is cruel to everyone else, and for some reason she thinks the queen would listen to her because... Anyway, she goes to meet the queen and surprise, surprise, she doesn't listen. The male lead is caught, stealing and brought to the queen, to which Snow White tries to plead with the queen to be fair and show kindness, I guess. Of course, in saying that, she only worsens the situation for him and he gets a harsher punishment. Way to go, Snow White. She then goes to sing some more and somehow manages to save the male lead from his punishment, I guess. Now, the movie has a very preachy narrative. If someone is talking about being fair, brave, and true, then it's about being kind or about someone's kind father's reign. I'm talking about you, Snow White. Do you know how many times Snow White repeated the words fair, brave, and true, my father's kingdom, and kindness? It became so annoying. She even has a necklace that says that. Like, girl, we get it. In the original movie, it had a theme of being kind, but it showed it rather than told it. When the huntsman wanted to kill Snow White, he couldn't bring himself to because she was a kind and innocent soul. He didn't say it, but we could see it. When Snow White went to the dwarf's cottage, she cleaned the place and even prepared food for the dwarfs. Even if you could argue that she was only doing it so she could stay there, she was so friendly and warm to them that when she was poisoned or they thought she died, they were truly heartbroken. It is even greatly exemplified by her relationship with Grumpy. Now, he didn't like her at first. In fact, he was misogynistic, but throughout the movie, she kept treating him with warmth that she even prayed to God for Grumpy to like her. And in the end, he did. And it was so earned when it happened. It didn't feel rushed or jarring like a jump scare. Oh, I'm referring to the relationship between Snow White and the male lead. We'll get to that later. Meanwhile, live action Snow White kept talking about kindness and telling everyone to be kind, but she didn't feel kind. In fact, at some point, it felt to me like she was putting on a facade and in secret truly hated everyone.
I'm a narcissist.
You know when someone makes their whole personality about something, most of the time it's just a cover-up for what they actually feel. And that's what I felt here. The most telling part of this is how she treated the 7 dwarfs. Now, when she gets to the dwarf's cottage, she quickly goes inside, looks around, gets to their bed and falls asleep. Now you might be wondering, isn't there something missing? And you're right. Something is missing that is of great importance. I always say this, if you are trying to replace something because you are not satisfied with the way it is, then replace it with something that works just as well or even better. You see, in the original, when Snow White gets to the cottage, she looks through the window and knocks on the door before entering. Then she notices that it's dirty and she decides to clean the place to surprise the owners of the house so they would be pleased and let her stay with them. After walking, that's when she goes to sleep. When the dwarfs come home, she begs them to let her stay, and in turn she cooks and cleans for them. And when they ask her if she can make their favorite dish, she says yes, and they are overjoyed and allow her to stay. You see, this doesn't come off as superficial. Instead, you see that the dwarfs are reasonably happy to have her stay with them. But in the live action, this does not occur. Instead, they are overjoyed and beg her to stay with them just because she is the princess. Why would you cut that off to replace it with nothing? It's just so boring. Then to add insult to injury, she makes them clean their house by singing the iconic Whistle While You Work song, and everyone is happy with this treatment. What?
I'm a narcissist.
Your relationship between Snow White and the 7 dwarfs in this movie just felt superficial, which is ironic because it seems like they were trying to distance themselves from the superficial beauty aspect of the original movie. And in turn, this makes their movie way more superficial. Then back into the plot, Snow White and the male lead falls in love. I swear, I blinked and suddenly they were in love. It was trying to be strangers, to friends, to enemies, to lovers, all at once. Make it make sense. Well, the queen disguises herself to poison Snow White with an apple, and the male lead kisses her and she wakes up. Hooray! Anyway, Snow White gathers the villagers to march to face the queen, and she convinces them just by saying their names. Somehow, just by saying names, she convinces a whole village to rise up. No strategy, no plan, just vibes. And of course, she wins. Who am I kidding? Now, let's talk about the theme of fairness in this movie. The movie was trying to give their definition of what fairness is. They didn't want fairness to mean beautiful, but at the same time, they were still implying that it means beautiful. Let me explain. The concept of mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all, refers to beauty. Even when the queen character is introduced, she's described as being very beautiful. It is very reasonable to think that they are referring to beauty, but Snow White is not treated as being beautiful. Nobody ever points out her beauty in any way. Instead, it now begs the question why Snow White is seen as the fairest of them all by the mirror, because if it is inner beauty, then why was the queen previously the fairest of them all? See, they kept their definition of fairness so vague that it started to not make any sense why the queen was jealous of her in the first place. The queen in this version is lacking in being scary. She's wicked in this movie, don't get me wrong, but she just comes across as a jealous and bitter person. That's it. There is no evilness in this movie. I expected Snow White to be afraid of the queen in the beginning, and by the end, when she comes into herself, she will have the courage and braveness to face her. But Snow White is fair, brave, and true from the beginning. So what does she learn? Anyway, the queen was so disappointing to say the least. All in all, this movie was a complete letdown, uninspired, rushed, and devoid of the heart that made the original a classic. Instead of crafting a meaningful reinterpretation, it fumbles the storytelling, loses the charm, and delivers a forgetful experience. If you want a real Snow White story, just watch the original animated version. It's far superior anyway. And if you're still here, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Toodles!